All right, the time is now 4 o'clock and it's time for me to resume the hearing. Just before we start, can we just have a quick technology check for everybody that we can all see and hear okay? I think there has been a little bit of feedback just in the last few minutes, so hopefully that will resolve itself. But for this session, I believe I'm expecting Mr. Jameson, the council solicitor.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, good afternoon, thank you. We have Mr. Begley, the planning officer.
Afternoon, ma'am.
Yes, you're coming through. Okay, that sounds all right. Okay, I don't intend to do any introductory remarks this afternoon for this session. I think I've done it enough today and you've all heard it already, so I don't think we need to go through that. So this session, matter 6, we're looking at Gypsy and Travellers, in particular policy 14 in the Part 2 local plan. Now, in terms of how I want to address this session, first of all, I am aware of the assessment that's been done more recently, 2019 work from ORS, Opinion Research Services, for the GTAA, the Gypsy and Traveller Accommodation Assessment for the Borough. I have no questions in terms of the actual methodology and the robustness of that document. So for the purposes of our discussion this afternoon, we will accept that that piece of evidence is robust and sound, and we'll accept the findings therein of the need for pitches within the borough. The need being 26 pitches between 2018 and 2033. So we'll take that as it is. What I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about is the council's approach to the provision of sites for Gypsy and Travellers. I'm sure, Mr. Begley, you're aware that the Joint Core Strategy Policy 31 provides criteria for assessing Gypsy and Traveller sites if they come forward through the development management process. But it also states that local plan Part 2s will allocate sites for Gypsy and Travellers. So there is clearly an inconsistency there with the Part 2 plan. I'm sure you're also aware of the requirement within the framework to provide for a range and type of and tenures of different housing in policy documents, and also the requirements of the PPTS, the planning policy for travellers and show people. So for my benefit, can you just, bearing in mind that situation that we're currently in, what is the council's view in terms of whether or not the Part 2 plan is consistent with the framework of the core strategy, and can you just outline for me the approach that you're currently taking and the evidence base that supports that approach?
Thank you, ma'am. The council recognises the inconsistencies with the joint core strategy and national policy, and that's the basis for the proposed modifications suggested. The approach to Gypsy and Traveller provision for the Part 2 local plan evolved during the process. The early formative stages of the plan were based on the 2011 GTAA, and that identified a level of need for Corby that had been accommodated on existing sites, and therefore no local policy or allocation of new sites within the borough was required. The council worked with its partners across North Northamptonshire to update the evidence in 2019, and publication of the updated evidence at such a late stage in the plan making process has limited the ability of the council to address the undersupply as part of the Part 2 local plan. And as a result, we've made a commitment within our updated LDS to prepare a separate Gypsy and Traveller allocation plan to follow on as quickly as possible from the Part 2 local plan.
Right, yes, I'm aware of that is your current approach and what you intend to do. And I do understand the situation that you are in terms of the evidence that's come forward in the 2019 document and the late stage that came about, and how that has really changed the requirement that you have had, and has caused difficulties for you in progressing the Part 2 plan. Did you consider at any stage possibly delaying the Part 2 plan so that you could incorporate further work on Gypsy and Travellers within that document, rather than going down a separate approach of a separate DPD?
The actual 2019 update was reported to members at the same time as we reported the pre-submission Reg 19 document for approval to Local Plan Committee on the 19th of June. It was at that stage, it was considered that by resolving to prepare a separate document that would enable our other important areas of policy included in the Part 2 Local Plan to progress without delay.
Yeah, fine. Yeah. That's understandable. Yeah, no, that's okay. I'm happy with that. So bearing in mind the amendments that you're suggesting within the text of the policy, sorry, the text of the supporting text of the document, not the policy itself, I should say. A couple of questions really arise from that new text in there that your proposed changes. There's a reference there to existing sites and the potential to meet some of the Gypsy and Traveller accommodation needs within existing sites. Can you just expand a little bit on that for me, please? What potential is there on existing sites?
We have 4 existing sites, and it's understood that these offer potential to intensify or expand. It's important to note that the need that was generated through the Gypsy and Traveller accommodation assessment was largely driven by established current populations within these sites, and they would wish to settle within their existing family groups and communities. So there's certainly an intention to look at the existing sites to meet this need. And also the expansion or intensification of existing sites to address the need was recommended by the GTAA. We've appointed Opinion Research Services to undertake a follow-up piece of work that will give us a better understanding of the individual needs and options for expansion or intensification of existing sites to meet the shortfall. The study findings were due to report before the start of this hearings in September, but that was delayed as a result of COVID restrictions.
Right, okay, so where is that work up to at the moment? Are you able to update us?
I think it's a couple of months behind schedule, but it shouldn't impact on our timetable incorporated in the updated LDS.
Right.
And I think the options being explored in that study will be able to sort of take forward through policy 31 of the JCS if there's potential of expansion.
So if those sites came forward as expansions or consolidation on existing Gypsy and Traveller sites, they would clearly be assessed against the criteria in Joint Core Strategy Policy 31, and they would then contribute towards the 5-year supply. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay, that's fine. So what is the current supply position in the borough at the moment?
The current supply position is set out in table 2 of our written statement, and that is that we have a requirement for 7.4 pitches.
Okay. Yes, I've got table 2 up here, and that's saying that your supply at the moment, there isn't a 5-year supply at the moment in time. Are you aware of any sites that may come forward, apart from those extensions to existing sites? Are you aware of any potential sites that might come forward? Any discussions that have been held with the existing Gypsy and Traveller population that they might be looking to submit future applications on individual sites that might contribute to 5-year supply?
There are no additional sites to those already identified. However, what's the site that's got? There is for intensification of that site, and that's
sorry. I just broke up slightly there. Can you just repeat that?
Sorry. We do have an appeal on one of the sites for intensification. That's only just been submitted.
Right. Okay. So that presumably is that one was refused by the council, presumably.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay, that's fine. I noted from the core strategy that there was a suggestion that the sustainable urban extensions could make some provision in relation to Gypsy and Traveller accommodation. Now, I do appreciate that the circumstances have changed relatively recently and those SUEs have progressed in advance of that. But do you think there is any potential for Gypsy and travel accommodation within any of the SUEs?
The SUEs all benefit from planning consent, and so the opportunity for provision of Gypsy and travellers is
oh, just oh, there we go.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I don't know whether that was me or what, but I disappeared, I'm afraid.
That's all right. You're back in quick time, so that's fine. Right.
Sorry about that, gentlemen. I don't know quite what happened there, but yes, we were just discussing the possible provision on the SUEs, Mr. Begley.
Thank you. All benefit from existing planning consent with no provision for Gypsy and travellers. However, it's acknowledged that the JCS does encourage the sustainable urban extension, says they're well placed to meet that need. So that's why the supporting text of policy 14 has been included as a policy hook for discussions or negotiations as reserved matter applications come forward.
Right, okay, thank you. Right, so is there anything else that, any other information or other evidence that you can give me to assist us, particularly in relation to the 5-year supply, which at the moment the council is quite vulnerable on that point. Is there any other evidence that there could potentially be sites that might come forward to make that provision?
I'm not aware of no sites coming forward, no.
All right, thank you for that. I'm aware that from the GTA that there is no need for a transit site within the borough. So that's fine. We don't need to address that in any more detail. What I do want to move on to is the council's approach going forward. Now, I am aware, certainly the council's position is that they're going to look at preparing a Gypsy and Traveller DPD. And in your statement at paragraph 218, you've provided a potential timeframe for that, which is, I'm aware, also included in your updated local development scheme. So can you just take me through that? What concerns me slightly about this is the length of time that this exercise is going to take, bearing in mind that this is a existing need. There is an element of urgency for you to try and meet that need at the moment, that currently you aren't, your Part 2 local plan isn't consistent with the core strategy or the framework or national policy. Can you just take me through that time frame and explain to me how you have judged that to be appropriate?
The timetable is considered a realistic timetable in comparison to other similar planning documents that have been produced in North Hampshire. However, it's a key in this is that the preparation work we're doing now with ORS to look at existing sites and the capacity of them to accommodate it, and whether some could come forward as through policy 31 of JCS will have a big impact on the timetable. So I think we certainly will review it, and whether we could do it quicker will depend on what findings we get from the OFS study, and whether the scope of that separate local plan will be reduced and we can produce it quicker. I think a lot does depend on what findings we get from the evidence base, really. So there is potential to speed it up.
Right, okay, now that's a good point. I think that, as you say, the work that's ORS are currently doing on the existing sites will feed into this. What confidence can you give me that this document can come forward in either in this time frame or in a shorter time frame? Because, as I said, this is quite an urgent matter for the council, really, to address. So is there anything further you can give me to give me confidence that this is going to be delivered?
Confidence is that we've got government, I mean, we've got council approval to put it in our LDS and a commitment to produce it. Whether it could be accelerated, I don't really know.
Right, I think that's maybe something you could have a look at, is whether or not you have the ability to try and accelerate the preparation of this document, bearing in mind the urgency of this particular issue? Because I think there is a question there whether or not you could try and be a little bit more ambitious to try, and it will be challenging for you. I do appreciate that, but I think it is something that maybe you need to have a look at. Now, looking at MM13 and the document I've got here, the suggested new text. I've read through that, and that seems very clear to me. It also makes reference to policy 31 of the core strategy, that will affect guide development in the future, in the interim before the DPD is in place. That I think is acceptable in terms of supporting text, and that is helpful to add to the document. Can we look at the actual wording of the policy itself, of policy 14? Currently, as drafted, it simply says the council will seek to secure a supply of additional pitches to meet the accommodation needs of Gypsy and travellers in the borough, as indicated in the most recent Northamptonshire Gypsy and Traveller Needs Assessment. My question to you really is that an effective and justified policy as drafted?
The policy is a bit of a marker
Hmm.
for where we're going forward. It certainly clearly sets out what the council's intention is to meet the long-term needs of Gypsy and travellers.
Yeah, I suppose just to help you on this, I think the point I'm trying to make is that the way it's drafted, in effect, it's like a statement of intent. It's not a policy. It's not a policy that will be used to judge or assess other developments. It is, as drafted, it's clear, and the supporting text will expand on that. I'm just wondering whether or not the council feels that it might be appropriate to just review the wording of that, or even if there is a need for a policy within the Part 2 plan. What does the policy itself actually add to what you're putting in the supporting text? I don't know whether you have a view on that at the moment. I know this is something that you may well not have considered, but do you have any view on that?
I agree, it is a statement, but it's because the policy is sort of evolved at a later stage, and it is important to have in, just even if we just have, because we've got the supporting text that's encouraging provision in the SUEs. So without that, we wouldn't have any sort of policy hook to try and negotiate and form discussions to encourage provision on them urban extensions.
Well, your policy hook will be Joint Core Strategy Policy 31, wouldn't it? So you've still got that in place with the criteria to assess any applications that came forward, and you're referencing that within the supporting text. So that's your policy position. I'm not necessarily saying you have to give me an answer now, but I think it's something that you might want to consider, whether or not it is appropriate to have a policy that is in effect a statement of intent like that, whether it could be revised in any way, or whether you think that possibly you don't even need a policy because it doesn't add anything on top of the Core Strategy Policy 31. What does it obviously add? So I think it maybe just means that you need to go away and just have a think about the whole approach, bearing in mind the Core Strategy Policy and the text within the Part 2 plan. So I think that's something I'll probably just leave with you to have a think about. Okay. Right, so from my perspective for today, I don't think there's anything else I really need to address, only really to enforce the urgency, I suppose, and the priority to secure sites for Gypsy and travellers in the borough, because at the moment you haven't got that supply. You have got the policy backing in the core strategy, but it is an area where you are vulnerable, shall we say, as a borough. So it's something that you need to address as a priority.
Can I inquire? Sorry, I've got my hand up.
That's
I think.
fine. Oh, sorry, I haven't put the participants up. Sorry.
No. As between two options, the one of saying in policy terms, the council could say that it will promote a gypsy and traveller local plan in accordance with the LDS, or quicker if possible. In the meantime, applications will be judged against policy.
Yeah,
That's one
Yeah,
approach.
that's one approach.
The other is to just leave it out, as you say, on the basis that it tells its own story through the supporting text. I just wondered, I mean, I can see that the first of those two options spells out clearly for the plan reader what's going to happen, rather than leaving it to be read between the lines as to what the policy is. And I wondered what you thought about that.
Yeah, I think that's a certainly valid approach. And I said I'm not necessarily looking for a solution here and now, because I think it's something we need to go away as a council and think about.
Yeah.
The best way to tackle this to ensure that the plan is effective.
Yeah.
The justification is there in terms of the evidence base.
Yeah.
It's just that whether the policy wording and the supporting text together, whether that is effective. I think what you just suggested there is potentially a very good way forward. But I would leave that with you to consider further, I think.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
No problem. Okay, so anything further from either of you on the Gypsy and Traveller issue matter? I know it's a short session, this, but I don't think there's a great deal else that we need to address, really. So from my perspective, thank you very much. That's, I think, all we need to discuss on this particular policy. So I will then draw this session to a close, and we will meet again tomorrow morning at 9:30 when we continue with our final day of hearings. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.